we've singled this out, John, for very, very obvious reasons, because if there is beauty in rod design, this is it. It is just glorious, and what a history this has got. Even I know about Sowerbutts, and there's a label. Just tell me about this. Tell me about its age, what it's made of.
Well, Sowerbutts, one of the famous London makers, not the only one, but certainly one of the famous London makers. What we look for as a collector is you look for the name appearing on the pole. I've no doubt they made poles for other people, but to get, as a Sowerbutts collector, you would ideally like the name on it. This has been restored back to mint again, but sympathetically they've managed to keep the entire gold transfer of Sowerbutts company on the butt section, which is absolutely beautiful. So it is exactly what it says on the tin. It is a Sowerbutts.
This looks as though it could have just come from the shop.
Yep, and that's, some people love it. Some people like to have them in their original state. But something like this, as beautiful as this, I think needs to be brought back to looking in this tan and black. But look at the workmanship. Well, these are silk ripped. Get my teeth in. These are silk wrapped or whipped all the way through, and it gets more exciting as you get towards the tip section. Do you remember the gamage rod we looked at?
I do.
In one of the previous videos, where it had this, what we thought was a repair, but it's a step down.
It's just spliced in. Yeah.
This is the same. So again, to get
this is made of whole bamboo.
This is whole bamboo.
Yeah.
This is.
How do they get the colour, by the way? Is it?
Sometimes they used to flame burn them. There's 2 or 3 different opinions as to why the flaming was done, but generally it was done to get rid of the bugs when it's coming from China. So they would basically burn them. Okay. They would incinerate the outside of the pole. Then they realised that the flaming effect on the outside could actually add to the attractiveness of the cane. And you can often see ones with little circles, dapples all the way up them, which is just amazing. But that is whole cane to here. But again, to get this, what you call the quiver tip or flexible tip, very early on we've got a split cane tip again. So that gives it its flexibility at the top.
Right, okay. And that presumably would be used for float fishing almost exclusively?
Yep.
And
Most
you
of
could get away, obviously, because you've got this, you've got the give in it, which allows you to use the fine lines, the gossamer lines you'd need.
Yes, that's right. I mean, silks were around. You would use you wouldn't use nylon. Because, you know, nylon was way after this. So you'd have some sort of cord line, whether it was silk or flax or even guts in the early days. Generally, predominantly London fished and London developed.
I was about to say, just again thinking about regional, so this would be for the Thames or for the Lee?
Well, I just learned this morning, we're constantly learning, I've just learned this morning that there are 2 distinct markets for the poles. The shorter poles, 16 foot generally and under, were for fishing the Lee. The longer poles, up to 16 foot and over up to 22 foot, were for fishing the Thames, where they had to get slightly further out. So if you imagine one of these put together at 22 feet would be a bit of a monster control, especially in a wind. I mean, I can imagine Dave Costa having fun with this, fishing for his bream. We might do that actually. We might give one of these to Dave and say to him, fish, catch fish, and see how he gets on. But beautiful piece. There are, I think, 7 poles in this collection here. So there's going to be a great deal of fun going
it's
through.
It's so beautiful that. What sort of age would that be?
Turn of the century-ish, if you use that as a ballpark figure, up to 1920s. What's nice about this, they've also, whoever's had it has had the landing net pole made to match. This has got a socket, standard threaded socket on the end. And that's interesting, because this socket, 3/8 BSF,
yes,
is the same as it was 100 years ago.
Really?
So you can get yourself a socket and a landing net or something from there, and we're still using it today. So not everything has moved on.
Last question.
Yeah.
How expensive relatively would these have been 100 years ago? Again, you know, we were just talking about people having one rod. This would have been the equivalent of what, a month's salary?
Probably
probably more.
Be a major purchase. You know, nothing to do with this, but in the major purchase bracket, Zane Graham, who's one of the world's most famous big game fishermen and authors, he approached Hardy to make a reel, but his one stipulation was it had to be so expensive, only the mega rich could buy it. Nothing about design, nothing about functionality.
That sounds very Zane Grey,
the most expensive reel on the planet.
And let's be elitist if we can be.
And they sold. So Sowerbutts would have been a lot of money. Your average man fished them in competition, but to the collectors these days, to have a Sowerbutts pole is just fabulous. You know, there are other makers, but they're kind of the leading, well-known makers.
And I guess thinking about this fishing on the Thames, I mean, it would have been. We always tend to think of roach, don't we? But I guess it would have handled barbel on that.
Mixed species, yep, bream and you know, yeah. So it was, but again, it's come back to the one pole for all jobs, one rod for all purposes. It's only recently now
And you depended on your ability to use it.
Yes, it did. So it's all about skill, and perhaps buying a more expensive pole to start with. That still happens to do. So interesting. I think we've got 5 or 6 more in there still. So as we have a dig through, we're going to have a bit of a play.
We'll be here till Christmas, won't we?
I hope so.